Welcome to State of Play, the show where we talk to the top players about what makes their faction tick. I'm joined today by James Ramsey of international England fame. How are you doing today, James?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you very much. I'm surprisingly warm. It's the one day of heat that we've had, this year so far in England, but it's been very pleasant.
How are you? How's the hobby hangover from the event?
Oh, it's fantastic because obviously I live in Nottingham, so if I don't have sort of a 4-hour journey after an event, I'm usually raring to go.
Yeah,
It's the Sunday trains if I have to get those.
yeah, that's what I had to face. It was horrible.
Yeah. How about yourself? I hear you've got some prep for another event coming up.
Yeah. It's fine. Yeah, I had a bit of a Monday was a tough day, but because I had to get an early flight back. But yeah, otherwise it's been good. Yeah, I've just been preparing another army for another event. Yeah, I'm not playing. Unfortunately, I'm not playing the army I really like playing because somebody else likes to play that one. So that's the problem with teams. You have to share sometimes.
It is, but there's plenty of benefits. It's a much more fun format, but we'll
it's good for that.
probably get into that a little bit down the line.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into Vampire Count specifically, I think it'd be interesting for the viewers and me as well to hear more about your Warhammer background. What was your Warhammer journey like, sort of from the beginning?
So I mean, I started playing. I think about when I was about 11. I really got into Space Hulk. That was what really really enjoyed that. And then from there, me and my dad just played. We liked fantasy. Although I was more of a 40, I did like 40k. This is back in second edition. I liked 40k. The models looked cooler to me, but he really liked the rank and flank kind of fantasy, like the aesthetics of it. So he got me into that, and I played dwarfs at the start. The classic,
the connoisseur's choice.
Yeah. Those they were awful models, those horrible ones. But I mean, they looked cool at the time, and I guess nowadays they're like back in fashion again, aren't they? There's retro dwarfs, but then from there I just played fantasy primarily until I was about 18, and I played for about 6-7 years. I did go to Warhammer World and play events there. I didn't play many events outside of Warhammer World. I found that being quite young, didn't really. I liked Warhammer World. It felt kind of like I think my parents liked that you could just drop you off there. You felt quite safe there. You didn't have to worry about anything happening. And I had friends that lived in Nottingham as well. So we, like Josh Roberts and a few others who used to play events with. And yeah, so I played events there. I met lots of people who actually are coming back into the game now. People like Keith Wilkinson. I remember he used to absolutely batter me like a long time ago. And he's getting back into it again now, which is really nice. And then from there, I heard about WTC when I was about 18 to 20. And obviously with university, I had a bit of a break. And that got me back into it. But I couldn't, there was no way I was getting back onto the fantasy WTC team. The England team back then was really good at fantasy. I was nowhere near that level. But I did start to like 40k a bit more. And I tried it and somehow managed to convince someone to get on a team. I have no idea how I got on the team that year. It was like, I don't know, just a miracle. And from there, I kind of put fantasy to one side because I found I couldn't play 2 game systems at once. I dabbled, like I liked to collect and paint the fantasy stuff, but not really play it competitively. And then from there, went to primarily tournament 40k player up until about 6 months ago. And then I haven't really played 40k since then, really.
Yeah, you're still coaching for Team England at the moment, aren't you? Is that right?
Yeah. So I've been coaching for the last 2 years. I really like that kind of social aspect to it. I don't feel like there's I just don't have time anymore to commit. 40k the level is incredible. To be the best at 40k, there's so many great players. They all put so much effort in. I just don't have that energy and that time to put in. Having a young family and a busy job. So I enjoy the social aspect of coaching. It still keeps me in the competitive, mindset and hearing about what's good in 40k. And I still like to play the odd game at a club. But I find that when I saw the old world articles, I really wanted to play Old World. That was like really caught me. I think it was obviously nostalgia and just the imagination of I can go back and paint my armies properly. Because back then I just used to I was 15, 16, I didn't know how to paint at all. So going back into the hobby again a little bit. And it was got me back into it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I also have one army from when I was 15 or 16 that is in a box that I haven't really done much with because it needs some serious work.
Yeah. You need
Uh,
to like strip it. You strip it all and get everything sorted. It takes a long time.
It really does, yeah. So I should probably get started on that at some point. It's Warriors of Chaos, so I should, strike while the iron's hot. Just add a
Oh,
dragon to it. Jobs are good.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
so what I found is quite frequently is a lot of very good players reach a point in the game where they give up on the single circuit, especially in 40k, in favor of spending the time, practicing into international level players and mostly only going to international events. You've kind of alluded to a decrease in enjoyment in the game. I feel like that goes hand in hand with the international circuit. Those players sort of, not everyone, but a lot of people sort of drop off the amount they play better, get better quality practice, but stop going to events that aren't so much worth their time. Was that sort of similar to what you had?
Yeah, so I did go to an event in January. That was the last one I went to, and it was an international event. And it was like you said, I like to go into the big team ones because I feel like again I saw everybody there, and I think people, so the players who are busier, they often just hit the big events now, maybe LGT and ATT, and they go to all the because the international scene for 40k is mad now. There's so many events that are 100+ players and they're all the best players in the world. Even some Americans like Anthony Vanella coming over. Like he came over like 3 times in the last like 3 months.
I love the wording there. Sorry, all the best players in the world, even some Americans.
Even some,
Obviously, not the way you meant it, but
no, the Americans are all right, I suppose. I mean, we haven't lost them for a while, so it's okay. But yeah,
sure, perfect.
no,
And
no, it's good.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
No, I
go
was
ahead.
going to say that's what made me slow down a little bit. Like I wanted to go to the higher quality events, and then um, like I said, it's expensive to go to these big
Mm,
events. And for me, living on an island, I've almost got two travels to make every time I go to an event anyway. So going internationals are even more difficult. And then with a younger family, I find it's more and more difficult. So I've been trying to stick just to more, just going to one area. That's why I've been going to these events in Nottingham. They're really easy to get to,
mm.
and so that's why I've limited my international just to once a year now.
It's entirely reasonable. It's a big commitment to make if you're not, especially if you're not playing, if you're only coaching.
Yeah,
So with that, Old World, I
yeah,
haven't been putting in the same level of commitment as you, but I've been going to a lot of events, traveling once or maybe twice a month to 40k events.
yeah.
For me, Old World has felt like a real fresh start where
hmm
you don't feel like you have to be going, every 3 weeks I've got an event
No, no,
to
not
keep
at
your
all.
finger on the pulse. You'd be like, hey, I've got one here and I've got one in 6 weeks' time, and that just feels like a good amount of time to be playing. It's nice to,
Absolutely.
yeah. I will say, you were saying that Old World cashing on nostalgia. It is the best sort of nostalgia bait game
Yeah, it is. It is.
ever because it's also just really good,
Yeah,
really fun to play.
it's a fun game to play. Like the models and I love the fantasy lore. I think I'm sure lots of people love the background of fantasy. I
Mm.
mean, they've got so many great books and stories, and you've obviously got. I played a lot of Total War,
Oh yes.
Warhammer. So again, just they've really fleshed that out, and I felt like back 15 years ago, whatever it was when I used to play, I didn't really appreciate how good of a game it was back then in 6th and 7th edition, and the models and the lore. I kind of just was like, yeah, it's just a bit of fun. But now I kind of have more time and effort to explore that side of it. So, yeah, I've been really enjoying that side. And yeah, the nostalgia trip is crazy. I really, really like it. I don't just kind of try not to go too competitive. I'm trying. I mean, I did make a bit of a start with vampire counts, but I tried. I'm trying not to go too competitive because that's my nature, just to kind of dive in like both feet first. But yeah, I'm just trying to dabble a little bit and trying to get the hobby side the best I can as well, because that is a really important part for fantasy. I found.
Absolutely. Obviously, the square-based GT we were both just at, level of hobby there was incredible. Made me start
Mm.
planning out what I'm going to do for my next army, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's people put so much effort in, and it makes you want to put the effort in as well, because you don't want to be the
Mm.
odd one out who's just dry brushed everything. You want to do it properly. And even though, like you said, your army was painted quite quickly, it looked really good. Like everyone's army there looked great. I couldn't think of a single army there that I was like, oh, I bet that only took couple of hours. Like, it looked all of them looked really good.
Yeah.
Whereas at a 40k event, I think there'll be maybe 10 armies in the room that might be like, wow, it's that kind of quality out of 100 maybe. So I was really impressed.
Yeah. All of the armies were displayed for voting, whereas normally at a 40k event, about 10% of the field, as you say, will put their armies up to be voted on. So
Yeah.
definitely do. So, as you said, you did make a bit of a splash at the start of the release of Old World, because you've won back-to-back Old World GTs with vampire counts.
Yeah.
Playing mostly the same list. Have you made many tweaks between the two? Is it?
Yeah, so I started, originally, I played, my actual first victim of Vampire Counts was Vic VJ.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were playing a lot of Old World when it first was released, and there was a bit of a lull in the 40k. I think they had a bit of a data slate. They were waiting for something. But he was playing High Elves, and we were playing on TTS, and we were just getting used to the rules and everything. And he'd played a little bit a long time ago as well, so he kind of remembered a little bit. And I thought, I really want to try Vampire Counts, because they're one of my favourite armies back in the day. And yeah, I just like tweaked a few bits. I thought, oh, this looks good. I immediately read the Wailing Dirge rule. I was like, this is a very good rule. But also just other rules as well were really good in that army. And it is a very deep book. There's a lot of really good units. So I started with all sorts of stuff. And then from there, myself, Courtney Rhodes, he also plays, used to play fantasy. He plays Vampire Count as well. Played a few games and just got some ideas going. And then just playing lots of games, mostly online, to just tweak things here and there. And then, I took a list that I thought was a nice starting army to the first one. Just a bit of everything. And then I thought what I'll do is for this event, just recently, I would lean a bit more into an extreme kind of variant of it and see how it would perform. And I still actually don't think that's the best option. I think there is other ways to play it, and I think that the book is really, really strong, and you can play loads of different units. There's probably no strongest build. There probably is lots of different ways to play this book. So it's a really, really great book.
That's a great thing to hear, because I think the list that you have been playing, and this isn't in any way an insult, is quite a dull build to play repeatedly. Mm-hmm. Once you've sunk 10, 15 games into it, it kind of feels like you've played the game to every variation. So glad to hear that there's lots of ways that you can take it. But let's so how does the list work? What's the basics of the list? What's the mechanic that makes it tick?
So I'd say the most important units in the codex, unfortunately, are not vampires. I wish vampires were good, but it's the Necromancers are so strong, and they made Invocation of the Heck a leadership ability now rather than a spell, which means that your opponent has no interaction with it apart from getting you in combat. That's the only way they can stop it, and that's one of the easiest things to stop. So your Necromancers are like the engine of the list. Literally, they power everything. They make your units come back to life. They are casting your buffs and your debuffs, but also the Mortis engines are probably up there in the top 3 units in the game. They're just, for their points, are absolutely mad. They have such great rules, and they have loads of synergy across like pretty much every unit in the codex. So I started with 1, and then I was like, well, if 1's good, I probably should just take 2. And that's probably the kind of the rule of...
That's the 40k player brain right there.
We did play with 3 at one point, but it was just a little bit... I think it is viable. Like, you definitely can play 3. I feel absolutely fine about it. And then, so those 2 were the kind of the start. And I knew I was going to play with 2 of those. No matter what list I started with, I was going to have them in my HQ slot. That's about 800 points already, so I knew that was a good start, a good more than 2/3, more than a third of the list. So, and then at that point, it was what core do you take to support them, and then once you've got your core picked, how many points you're going to invest in the specials and the rares, because there's different options in there that are good, but they're quite difficult to squeeze in because the points don't quite work. And again, this depends on how many Mortis engines you want to run. If you want to run 1, you've got a lot more freedom with the specials and rares. If you're running 2 Mortis engines, you really are committed to your 500 point core plus something to go with it, because you just run out of points.
Yes.
So I'd say that those 2 Mortis engines and the Necromancers, they're the key. They start the list off.
Yeah, absolutely. And this all hinges around Wailing Dirge. Can you give us a quick overview of what Wailing Dirge does and why it's so strong?
Yeah, so Wailing Dirge, it's on 3 different units across the armor. 4 if you include the Ghoul Kingsman, I suppose. And it works by your opponent rolls 2d6 and adds 2 to the roll, and they compare it to their leadership value, a characteristic, and they suffer that many wounds that they've rolled over with no armor saves, no regeneration saves. So on paper, if your leadership 8, 9, 10, you're probably rolling about that anyway on average. So there's not too much damage unless they roll like a double 6. It's pretty mediocre. It's only an 8-inch range. It does have some really strange like interactions that it's not. It does for some reason it doesn't have any restrictions that you can shoot. You can shoot it into combat. It can be shot at models that are engaged, even though you're not engaged with them, which is very strange. The fact you can pick characters out of outside of units, even if they're protected by the being within 3 inches of a unit. You can still do it to them. You can do it after you've charged. You can do it not after you've marched, but you could do it after. I suppose after you've charged, which is really unusual. That actually mechanic I haven't explored fully. I'm not the most aggressive player, so it was this weekend I was trying to explore that a little bit, trying to charge in and get some extra range. And so that is a really powerful mechanic. Well, it's not a powerful mechanic on the surface, but when you start to go into the buffs and debuffs the vampire counts can do, you start to kind of scratch why it's really powerful. So it all combines with, first of all, necromancy. It's one of the best laws in the game. People really sleep on it, even if you don't play leadership attacking rules. It's really powerful. It's got really great spells. Probably 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 are very good. 2 of them are okay, but the main issue is they're really high casting values. So they don't really suit most armies because they're hard to reliably cast, especially the most powerful spell, which is the Spiritual Vortex, which is it's a vortex which is a 5-inch blast, and the key thing is it doesn't move, which is amazing. It's casting on 11, which means that your opponent trying to remove it is very difficult, especially with fated dispel. They haven't rolled double 6s, which is very hard. And it's got a huge aura. So the aura is 8 inches from the template. From a 5-inch blast, you're talking like
26-inch circle.
Yeah, you're talking literally like a third of the table is covered by this thing, and it's got a 12-inch casting range, which when a mortis engine moves 10 inches, you can people from about 30 inches away from it, and it applies a -1 leadership debuff, which is okay, but it also turns off Inspiring Presence, which is just one of the most powerful rules to start turning off, because most armies have one leadership 9 or 10 model, and then everybody else is leadership 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And as soon as you nuke that leadership down by 1, then their leadership 7 or 6. And of course, the great thing is trying to get 2 or even 3 of those spells in your list. And if you get 2 or 3, -2, 3, you can cause chaos. And it's not just the Wailing Dirge. It's things like restraining, things like reforming, things like marching, terror checks, fear, because of course undead fear and terror is everywhere. Panic checks. I killed a lot of units with panic over the course of the game, over the course of the event. Sorry. Loads of interactions, like other undead, stopping them raising doing their resurrections. So necromancy, Wailing Dirge, you combine those two together, you have a really strong mechanic that lets you, even though undead don't have good shooting, they have that really close range, like basically anything can die to that if they don't have the right tools. And there are lots of tools that can stop it, but they're hard. If you don't know about the tools, you won't pick them. You probably won't take plus leadership, or you won't take leadership. Being like there's a Warriors of Chaos banner that lets you ignore leadership modifiers, for example. I mean, why would you take that? Why would you take that banner?
75 points, I think.
Yeah, so. It's a very expensive banner, but if you've got a big unit of Chosen and vampire counter in the meta, like maybe it's a good choice. So that there are tools, but people don't bring them because, of course, they're not really used to playing at the moment. But I think over the next course of a few weeks, months, I think we'll see some kind of pushback against this kind of list. But it's fantastic, lots of damage, and with everything with the undead really buffs that mechanic. like just being able to have units that don't run away. So it means that your opponent has to grind through you, and then you're going to keep screaming at them as they're in combat. It's very, very strong.
I've been fortunate enough to only played against a very toned down version of the list, one Terrorgeist and one Banshee. So I hadn't even considered the fact that when you get in close, you scream a unit, kill, a chunk of models. They're then going to take that panic test. And then once they've taken the panic test, they're probably going to flee because they're debuffed to the 9s. That is even more horrendous.
So I played an Empire play on the weekend who had a big unit of Knights. They had a level 4 wizard in there, and they were right in the corner they failed a fear check. I surrounded them with Vortex. I put 2 Vortex near them, and they failed a fear check to try and get out.
Yeah.
And then I just shot a single scream and killed 3. Leadership, they were down to leadership 5. Or leadership 4, I think, with Spirit Leech, and they ran off the table. And that was a big... Basically, that flank was lost from those 2 failed fear check and a failed panic check. Psychology is really important in fantasy. Another reason why I like Undead is being immune to psychology across the list is really strong as well. Like reliability. Your units are not going to run. They're not going to fail fear checks or terror checks. Like, you just don't care about that stuff, which is very strong. You do have the downside of not being able to run away from charges, and obviously crumbling is quite powerful. But I felt that those were things I could mitigate most of the time.
Especially when you have massive damage output. If your opponent's getting in close, all you have to do is hold them off for a turn or 2, and then...
Yeah, definitely. So the Mortis engines and Necromancers were crucial. They also had the new FAQ in between the 2 events, which interacted with the fly value. So the first event I played, fly wasn't able to be buffed by the Mortis engines plus 1 move.
Right.
So most units were fly kind of 8 or 9, which was fine. It was not slow, but it wasn't that quick. But once they fact that fly can be buffed by Mortis engines, I knew immediately that was going to make my army like probably twice as good, because every few inches you get makes a huge difference when you've got an 8-inch range. So going from a 16 threat to a 18 threat means your opponent has to stand even further away from you, or has to risk. You can hit them from even further away, especially if you get like a lucky overrun or something like that, which you didn't expect.
Yeah, like a 17-inch charge range is not super uncommon for cavalry, for example, with Swift Stride. And it's not that hard to make with the way the Swift Stride mechanic works. But then a 19-inch charge, you don't see that many of those.
No, because Terrorgeist with 2 Mortis engines and movement 11, so they get like a 20-inch threat range, which pretty much outranges anything. Things like Fellbats, you can get them to movement 12 with 2 Mortis engines, and that gives you 21, which is... With Swift Stride, you basically can pretty much never fail a charge with them. They're really, really fast. They're a unit that I haven't explored too much, but something that I think, like, going forward, that like there's so many good units that can benefit from these Mortis engine buffs. So those 2, and then the also that really buff Spectral Steed, which is one of the best spells in the game. People don't talk about it, but it's a ridiculous spell. It's only a 9 to cast, which if you look at the Shimmering Dragon from the Illusion lore, I think that's the same. I think it's 11 and then 9 as well. But the Spectral Steed gives you Ethereal, and it also is Remain in Play.
Yes.
So having those 2 things make it so that you can cast it turn 1, and your units can just fly around like all game. And it's very hard to interact with, because again, leadership, 10 plus to dispel with Fated is very hard to do. And having, I know Banshee's already ethereal, but being able to move them 10, which plus 2 from the Morton does movement 12, is again ridiculous.
Yes, because they're very sad when they only move 4 inches. That's not particularly.
No, they don't like losing their base movement. Their base movement is very. Also, the ethereal doesn't let you walk through units, so you're kind of stuck. If you're behind a zombie, you're just literally like they can't go anywhere. But being able to fly over them gives you so much more flexibility. And they become then the stars of the show. If you roll 2 Steed Shadows, those Banshees are unbelievable. They just really cause a lot of problems. And then, of course, the most important spell is the Hellish Vigor. Hellish Vigor is a ridiculous spell. It's the same as the Tomb Kings, which I think the Tomb King version is good on Tomb Kings, but Tomb Kings I don't think they have the same output as Vampire Cats have got way more damage than Tomb Kings do. And
So Hellish Vigor, the spell basically gives you an aura of reserve move.
yes,
So Tomb Kings don't necessarily have a short range nuke that they want to sort of dip forwards and dip backwards to
yeah,
be
exactly.
doing every turn. Whereas your list, how are you using Hellish Vigor to
Yeah,
really?
so Hellish Vigor is again maybe Spectral. I said Spectral Steel was a really good spell.
Hmm.
Hellish Vigor is another level spell. There's so many applications. I could honestly spend 5 hours talking about how many different times I've used it. So it's only it's a 7 to cast on the one target, and it's a 10 plus to get it on your command range. And because you have a Mortis engine, your command range is 18, so it's a huge bubble. Tomb Kings, they can have Hierophant on like a dragon or something, but unless you take the Mortuary Cult, he can't be a general, so he's only got a
Hmm.
leadership range. But of course, Mortuary Cult get an 18 inch if he's on a dragon, which is nice. But yeah, it gives you reserve move. So reserve move is a really powerful mechanic. It lets you move after everybody's shot in your army. At the end of the shooting phase, you can make a normal move, a basic move, and so that includes maneuvers as well. So there's many different options. First of all, just being able to move your undead units that can't march twice makes them really fast, especially with a Mortis engine. It basically means they're getting +4 to their move across a turn. So, say you have a unit of skeletons, they're normally moving 4. That's all they'll be able to move for the whole turn. Whereas with Mortis engines and reserve move, they're suddenly able to move 6 twice, which is 12 inches. They're moving 3 times as fast than they were before. So, the army's gone. If you tell anybody, I can make your army go 3 times as fast. It's like having triple march on everybody,
Yeah,
which is amazing.
without having to be in marching column.
That happened to be a marching column, which like dwarfs would they know how good
I was
that
going to
is.
say dwarves are absolutely seething
Yeah, yeah,
hearing this.
exactly. Like undead are meant to be one of the slow armies, but no, vampires are really, really fast. Um, and so there's many interactions. So first of all, moving fast is good. But then being able to use maneuvers at the end of in the shooting phase is really nice. It means you can often move forward and then do one of these like reforms or redress the ranks, which normally you wouldn't want to do because it would cost you all your movement. Like your whole turn is just sat there reforming, but you don't feel so bad if you've moved 6 inches forward and done it. You feel okay with that.
Hmm.
So that's really useful, especially the zombies being able to change if they're going to go wider or narrower. That's really useful. And then of course you've got the shooting with the Wailing Dirge. Of course, that's where it is really powerful because you're able to move forward, get into a very short range where normally you would be worried about being hit back, but then
Hmm.
you can often walk backwards with the reserve move. And most of these units now are quite fast. The things like a Mortis engine is movement 10 with the aura buffs itself now. And then being able to move backwards 5 inches. And so you can get within 8 and then move backwards 5. So, being at 13, that feels a lot more safer than 8 inches because most infantry units are movement 4, so like 10-inch range. So you can get out of that. And even things like dragons, yes, they're movement 9
Hmm.
stride, but if you've got things in the way or you have like vortexes, like difficult terrain in between you and them, they can even struggle to charge you from that range. And of course, banshees are the best because they're movement 12 with spectral steed, or maybe 11 if they're not in range of the other Mortis engine. And so they are able to move 12 inches forward and 11 inches back, which with a single model and 25 mil base, it can get anywhere it wants to. I mean, I was often just throwing them forward sometimes just to get behind a hill, for my next turn because it still
Hmm.
keeps spectral steed. It can remain in play, so I don't have to worry about being in range next turn to cast that spell again, unless you luckily dispel it. And Spectral Seed actually is a conveyance spell as well, so you can do it after the Mortis Engine's move, which is really nice. You can move into range. So yeah, just that reserve move lets you actually have a movement phase, lets you actually outmaneuver most army. People didn't realize how fast the army was, especially another spell that you can combo it with is Van Hel's Dance Macabre.
Hmm.
That can add plus D3 move to a unit. So you can have a Graveguard unit that's now suddenly +2 move, then plus from the Mortis engines, then +3 from Van Hel's if you get lucky. So now it's movement 9. They can then double move, so basically move 18 inches, which is like Spectral Steed level basically. And there's nothing special. It's just you just casting 2 spells that are very easy to cast.
Yeah.
Van Hel's I think it's an 8 for 1 value and a 10, which with level 6 equivalent casters, with +6 to cast with 2 mortis engines, you get it off very reliably.
Perfect. And of course, something that you sort of alluded to but didn't really go into, terrain. If you've got a hill in front of you that you can park your models behind, because hills are infinitely tall up until you stand on them.
Yes, yeah.
So
So there's different ways to do this. So it's kind of like, maybe there's a bit of 40k background, but everyone's heard of jump shoot jump with the Tau.
Oh, yes.
Everyone hates Tau, but it's fun when you're a Tau player. And so I knew that one of the best things is being able to use terrain to, because with fly, obviously you can jump over most terrain or you come back through it. And even forests, like you can, yes, it's dangerous for you to do it with mortis engines because they're chariots, but I didn't worry too much about it. So sometimes I would just tow in and shoot out and come back out again. So you're able to move onto a hill, get line of sight, because a hill gives you great vantage point, and then you can shoot. I often use magic missiles, actually. Magic missile, it wasn't so much screaming from hills because the range is so short, but you have to jump up and throw out a magic missile at something, and then jump back down again and be safe. Because you have to move a millimeter to get onto the hill, really, to see over it, or maybe an inch or so to get onto the hill. So being able to then jump backwards again very, very easily. It worked really well in a couple of games. And even doing it with units just to get out of the way, to let the mortis engines do it, like just be able to move out of the way and then go back on the hill to block people charging you, for example.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about doing this with fellbats, using hills to fly them onto a hill, and then you lose a model, so then you can resurrect back onto the hill again to then charge again. So there's also the mechanics with hills and terrain. There's like a lot to explore, and I said vampire counts with reserve move and resurrecting. You can do all sorts of shenanigans with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And resurrecting to get into the place you need to be is such a 40k mechanic as well.
Yeah. I try not to abuse that because I actually don't like how it works in fantasy. Because yes, if you're by like kind of raw, if you're a skirmisher, you can kind of go wherever you want with when you resurrect. So like I did use a unit of ghouls in the first event, and I tried when I was in skirmish mode, I tried not to check conga line and like all over the place. I just tried to just resurrect them just nearby. It's like a self-limiting rule. But right now, they're kind of, it's a bit of a debate actually. We can even do it on skirmishes because of the they don't have a front rank, which is
right.
But if you're allowed to do it on skirmishes, then yes, theoretically you can conga them like 10 inches across the table and charge, which I don't like doing that. No, that's not for me.
We've had that fixed in 40k in the last sort of 6 months. Now you can get a little bit more into charge, but not the full conga lining GSE. So hopefully, if that becomes a problem, it gets addressed. But
I feel like just one model, like the coherency, like a 1 inch thing, is what I normally play, and I feel like that's a reasonable way of playing it.
Yeah, that's how it's limited in 40k at the moment. It has to be stuff that was in coherency at the start of the turn. But so in a sort of, if we're thinking about the game from a team's perspective, which is really how Old World is scored, you've got that old school WTC system where the points differential you have is the score that you're getting.
Yeah.
As our host of the weekend likes to say, no one in the UK has won a GT by winning 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
So far, the best is 4 wins and a draw.
Yeah.
Do you think your list has the potential to go 5 wins into a competitive field?
So I think it depends on the players who are there. I think the players, if there's someone's experience against Vampire Count, especially the list I was playing with, a very, I'd say, simplistic style of just slow moving infantry ish and plus screams. I think you can definitely play around it, and you can avoid being beaten by it. You can keep it very close, picking off the edges, trying to get maybe a last minute kill on something like late in the game, and try not to let me pin you down. Because ultimately, what I want to do is I want to kind of encircle you with some of the units, and then so you can't run away. But armies are fast enough to get away from it, and they can use terrain to get past me, especially if it's like impassable terrain. I feel like it's possible, but the higher the skill level of the players in the event, the harder it's going to be, of course. And I don't. It's not. It's like I said. I think this screen list is not the. In 6 months' time, probably people won't be playing like this kind of style. It probably is a more optimized way of doing it, because I think you do need more than just one like big hammer, like kind of style of game. You need some other game plans. And my list didn't have many B or C plans. It just kind of just had a really good plan A,
Yeah.
which not many people could deal with. And
No, no.
I've drawn both times to Beastmen. Actually, Beastmen have been a really difficult matchup because Viletide is very dangerous for any
Mm,
large model. It can basically kill them instantly, especially Terrorgeist that just fall over to the 6 wounds. And Mortis Engines, if you buy them defensive buffs, then yes, they can probably take a Viletide or two. But if you don't, which I decided I was going to try and run without defensive upgrades on them, then all it takes is one bad roll and you lose your general. And if you lose your general with this army, you will lose the game. 100% you'll lose the game because your army will crumble really fast. Everything's low leadership. Terrorgeist leadership 4, for example, they will just disappear in a couple of turns. And so I had to play very carefully. And Valetide's got a very similar range to Screams. It's a 15-inch range with a kind of a 4 to 7-inch move, I don't know if they're on a chariot or not, which is kind of that 20-inch range. And my range is about 20 as well. So we kind of both time we've had Mexican standoffs where nobody really wants to commit. And also it's kind of a problem with a smaller event in that you often have a limited pool of players that are going to be on those 4-0s. So you know that drawing is not the end of the world. Whereas in a 100-man event, if you take a draw, you're
you're
probably
out.
you're out the running of winning the event. So nobody will sit there and just take a draw because it knocks you both out. But in this kind of system where you have to win by 100 points, it encourages sometimes that kind of I'll wait till turn 6 and I'll make a mad dash for something. And my army doesn't have the range to do that, whereas some armies can do that to me. So I think that's what could happen.
That's interesting. Obviously, they were on the same mission as well. The
Yeah.
same. Was that a factor in the game? Do you think, or was it just a coincidence?
So I think the mission, it's like the rules itself. No,
Yeah.
the tower thing. I mean, both times I've gone second. If I'd have gone first, I would have won both games. Yeah, because I would have been able to control the tower at the end of the game. Because I always sat on basically on the tower, in control of the tower, but I just couldn't control it basically because it always got contested at the end of the game. But it was the fact that it's a large impassable piece in the middle of the table makes it quite difficult. If I go one way, they'll go the other way from me.
Sure.
So I have to split my army across both flanks, and then I'm worried they're going to hit one flank really hard. I don't quite have the speed to get from one to the other that easily with any short-range screams, and they can maybe push past that flank. It was easier this time around because I had 6 screams in the list, so I could put 3 in each flank. Whereas the previous list I only had 4, and 2 I felt was very dangerous. If someone had like a Gorgon, could probably pass leadership checks and get through, and if it charged something like a Nautilus engine, it probably does kill it, or at least it really damages it. All it takes is one Viletide or a Ruby Ring or something that could knock its wounds off.
Yeah.
So I had to be quite careful in that mission. And unfortunately, I went second. But if I'd gone first, maybe could have won. But I feel like it wasn't a mission thing. It's probably just Beastmen themselves. They're just a really good army.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to hear the because I hadn't really thought about it in terms of the casting. Obviously, Viletide being able to pick off your general specifically or any of the big models is it's a big counterpunch there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, any other sort of issues that you find with the list other than not having a plan B or C and the general crumbling? Is that the sort of main downside of the list you'd say?
So the list, so Undead, they obviously don't have much shooting. You're relying really on a couple of magic missiles that are both range 15 with Unquiet Spirits. You're relying on whales, of course. You don't have any other way of doing, like, you haven't really got any war machines to throw stuff at people like a long way. Dealing with other people's war machines can be tricky if they play them well, if they can protect them. Because again, you don't have, like, you can take Fellbats and they're fine and they're not bad, but they're made of paper, so they will die. If you send them off like turn 1, they'll just get shot and killed. So you have to kind of move them up with the rest of your army and use them later on. So like war machines are a real problem for Mortis engines. They're large targets. They're on massive bases. They're very easy to hit. Terrorgeist even more. I mean, you can't miss Terrorgeist. It's the base it's like it's 100 by 150.
It is, yeah.
With a Doom Diver, like you're not missing it. Like it's auto hit rate unless you misfire. Like, it's hitting basically. And like if you get a couple, I mean, I played an Empire player who, 2 cannonballs killed Terrorgeist just like that, just dead. And I was like, okay, I'm down 200 points. I'm now I have to now push. So I had to push, and luckily he'd given me the map. Well, I'd picked the map, which had given me a bit of a staging point. If he'd have vetoed that one, it would have been really difficult. So I think gun lines are a real problem if you're running these big monsters. That's why I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this style is the best way of playing. If I was going to a really big event, I think you play Wood Elves or Empire. I think you could probably lose quite easily if you go second, perhaps, or if you get a bit unlucky. There are some spells that are quite damaging, like Miasma. If they can get that off on the wrong place, like really slow you down, stop you charging, it maybe can pin you down. So same as like a unit of dogs, something like that, in a really nice position. They can Miasma like stay as a big blob, and so it can be pinned in. And probably the most difficult spell to deal with is Pillar of Fire. That is a really horrible spell to play against, and it requires a lot of thinking. Well, I played Hormus, who was the Warriors of Chaos player, a very good player. He knew straight away Pillar of Fire was his key to win this game because he just played Rebecca in the previous game, and the Pillar of Fire had done an absolute number on her, unfortunately. She made one small mistake, and it meant that Pillar just gone through a whole army and picked up like massive amounts of models. I think it killed both Banshees and a load of models, basically. And I was thinking, I need to stop that. And I played a lot against Pillar of Fire because we identified that early on, that was a problem, that the list wants to bunch up. It wants everything to sit in a big, tight bubble. And so one Pillar of Fire will go through every single unit, literally every single model in your army if you don't position properly. And both Banshees will die, and you'll lose like 3 to 4 zombies from every unit, which doesn't sound a lot, but if someone's got 2 Pillars of Fire, and they're doing that, and that's going through every single player's turn, like, you will fall apart really fast. You can't heal all that damage up. And so spreading out, even though you don't want to, you have to spread out. You have to move everything away from each other, which the auras then don't work as well. Vortex doesn't work as well. Your Banshees, they want to stay within 3.
Yep.
But you can't because of the pillar. It's a 3-inch template, so if it hits your zombies, it'll go straight through. You just die, you're just dead. So you have to rely on reserve moving and keeping in hidden from line of sight, so they don't fireball you or whatever or shoot you. So yeah, that spell is a problem. You need to really think, and I think when people play more, they'll start thinking, "I'll take more battle magic users," because that is one really strong way of countering these kind of army.
Sure, that makes sense. It does feel like the sort of army that's very strong at the start of an edition and then potentially falls off as gimmicky armies tend to be stronger at the start of an edition, and as people sort of work out,
learn how it works.
Yeah, which is good. So with that in mind, what are the other sort of directions to take vampire counts? What are sort of the key units or lists that you might be thinking of moving towards in the future?
Yeah, so I think there's loads of play in units that people aren't really using at the moment, which there's lots of speed in the list, which is where I think the list needs to go. You need to be quick. Slow-moving armies, I think, will always struggle into these sort of shooty armies, which I think are the natural counter to these big monsters. So units like, I think what they called the
Varghast, I think.
Yeah, the smaller ones, the kind of the medium-sized ones, they're really fast.
Yeah.
They've got a great profile. They've got a good amount of attacks. They are frenzied, but they've got the 360 line of sight, which is really nice.
Or terrible, depending on what army you're playing against.
Yeah. It depends. Yeah, you can be led around with that, but your movement 11, I believe, with the Mortis engine nearby. So being able to use that, you can use a lot of speed there. It's really nice. I think hex wraiths are really interesting. Slashing attacks are quite rare in this game. Anything where you can attack people in the movement phase, you can't really do much about it. And again, with Mortis engines buffing their movement, because they're ethereal, so they don't fly, they can actually march. And so being in marching column, they can move 30 inches with 2 Mortis engines. And so being able to hit a caster or like a cannon or something like that with some strength 4s. It's not like a huge amount of damage, but it might just get you that turn you need. I think Fellbats are really strong. I think Direwolves are quite good if you want to have a bit more chaff. Even I've always found zombies could do their job pretty well, but I think Direwolves are interesting. And then, of course, I've used the Blood Knights. They are very good, Blood Knights. Being able to bring them back is basically it's like their gimmick, really, being able to bring 4 of them back every time you cast.
Yeah, I feel like you want to be running more of a Death Star with the Blood Knights if you go in them. Yeah. I've played against 5 a couple of times and just wiped them out in one activation. Or
100%. They can, especially if your opponent's got they've got the Plague of Rust
Fanatics.
or Fanatics, yeah, or anything which can do like a big spike of damage, perhaps even with flaming attacks because they are flammable. So I think they are really good, but I'm currently leaning not to use Blood Knights. I feel like they're that big Death Star. It's very vulnerable to miasma and other
Yep.
spells that can stop it. So I think that if you're going to play with more MSU units, like I said, the Vargeist, the Fellbats, using the speed of the undead that you normally people don't expect you to have, you can still bring 4 screens, or plenty to deal with their dragons and things, but using some of your faster units that aren't just basically big Terrorgeists that are quite vulnerable to being shot at.
Yeah.
I also think you could run no Mortis engines. If you really don't want to run Mortis engines, you can run no Mortis engines. It gives you a lot more room to play with in the character slots. And so you can start taking some interesting characters. There are some really interesting vampire builds I've looked at, but they don't. The problem is that they struggle to compare with the Necromancers. So
Sure.
if you're going to take one, you have to take you have to take level 2 Necromancers. It probably means you're going to have to take a BSB to give the reroll for the leadership invocation, because leadership 7 is pretty difficult to play with compared to leadership 8. Leadership 8 is the minimum. I never actually found a BSB actually that important with leadership 8. I did fail spells. I did fail it obviously, but it was always like playable. But leadership 7, I would have to bring one. I feel.
Yes. Yeah.
Reliability.
A unit that I've got my eye on is the Black Knights. So they're pointed the same as not the Knights Errant, the Knights of the Realm for Bretonnians, I believe. Yeah. But the T and Strength and Toughness 4. Sure, they only have what do they call it? Do they have? Wait, I'm looking at them now. They don't have cavalry spears, do they? Do they just have hand weapons?
You have to buy. You can buy them.
You can buy lances. That's fine.
You
okay.
Buy lances,
I had a moment of panic there.
No, you can buy everything, but they do become a little bit. They become not super expensive. They become reasonably expensive with everything.
Sure.
But then being toughness 4 with grip save, you can put the Drakenhof ban on them to give them a 5-up regen. They're not flammable, so they can just like Graveguard, they're not flammable, so you're getting the 5-up apart from against Killing Blow. And so it's pretty reliable. Not many units have mass Killing Blow. Mostly few attacks kill a character or something.
Sure.
And yeah, they're pretty good. I use Graveguard that are basically foot-mounted Black Knights, and yeah, being able to move them, starting at movement 7 rather than movement 4 would have been nice. Definitely would have been nice, and having a couple of horse attacks as well. Because you laugh at them, but the horses, having Van Hells on them makes them they're actually not bad at all. They'll kick something to death. So yeah, I think there's some play with Black Knights. They are a little bit pricey, but being core, you don't feel as bad. I feel like, okay, I can pay 300 points for a unit. Okay, if it's core, I can pay that because at least I'm not wasting the points. I have to spend it anyway, so maybe this unit would be okay. So I feel like they're pretty good. Yeah, and I really love ghouls. Ghouls are a really good unit. So flexible. You can run them in skirmishes. You can run them small units, or you can run big units. Really, really wide. I mean, I'm a big abuser of Linehammer, which I feel bad about, but not when I roll 20 attacks. I feel good again then when I do that. But no, it does look a bit strange. But Linehammer, Undead are really strong at Linehammer because you can bring models back, so you don't really care if you've got 4 units charging. As long as you don't crumble to death in one go, you don't really mind. You'd rather have maximum output the next turn. So that was one thing that was always caught people out was they would charge my Graveguard, and I'd be 15 or 20 wide, and they would kill a lot of them. They maybe kill 10 of them or maybe 12 of them on the charge, and then the next turn, because they had great weapons, initiative 1, but they wouldn't realise that Van Hell's you could buff it with plus D3, and then you could have Mortis engines as well plus 1, so they're up to initiative 5 or 6, and then they would be going first before your opponent, and obviously with them all coming back to life again, they just get chopped up at that point. And they were really, really good unit. And I think Black Knights probably could do the same job, probably do a similar option.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think in that role the Graveguard feel a lot tastier, especially with being able to add 5 to the rank twice with double movement phase shenanigans from the
you can. They can be drilled, and I think drilled. It's a really good rule in Graveguard, but it's 2 points a model, so you have to think: is that worth it? And it definitely could be. I mean, giving one of their biggest weaknesses is if they get caught in the flank, because they can
Sure.
only give ground, and so being able to redress to get some more models over there would be really good. But I just never found the points. But if I did have something 50 points in that list, I probably would take drill. It would be really nice. Yeah, pretty much the core I looked at the start, I was like, this is all word of crap, basically. It's just zombies. But
Yeah.
now the more I play, the more I'm like, oh, there's so many good core units. I actually want to try them all out again.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I'm excited to see is a good vampire on the back of a dragon. But I think the trick is not making it a caster and spending loads of points on that. I think it's such an easy trap to fall into. But if you do that, you're adding an extra 100 points on an already expensive model.
Yeah, the issue with vampires is that they are probably, if you could like have unlimited points, you would say they're one of the best units in the whole game, because they've got
Sure.
fantastic regen, ward saves, they have armor from the zombie dragon, they've got good stats, their combat is great, they're level 3 wizards, they can heal themselves, they can do everything, but they are 600 points. And they're they're probably similar to a Chaos Lord and a Dragon, who is arguably would just probably kill him in
I don't think it's even arguable. Just way more effective.
He'll kill him in one round of combat with enchanting aura, with an ogre blade. He'll absolutely mess you up.
Yeah.
Especially with a couple of Gaze the Gods rolls. Whereas you're relying on being a level 3 wizard, which then means you probably have to go lore familiar on him. It probably means you're going to take a big expensive sword to use doppelganger on.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a ward save then, so suddenly you're got no ward save on this 600 point model. I mean, I felt bad with a 380 point engine with no ward save. I wouldn't want to play with a 600 point model. It would just be too risky. A couple of cannonballs and he's dead, and that's you might say artillery is dead, but I don't think artillery is dead. I think artillery is just sleeping at the moment. People are going to bring it back.
It's incredible. I ran 4 war machines at the weekend, and they were so good.
Yeah. I think people are sleeping on them a lot. I think people are complaining about the template changes, and yes, it has nerfed them, but there are plenty of units where that direct hit is all you need. You just want to It's just a big hit.
Yeah, if there's one thing that's non-vampire counts related that we can urge people to do, it is start using templates again. I had a moment in Game 5 where the dwarf player put a flame template over my unit of goblins, and I was like, how many to maximize that for me? How many do I hit? So you hit 4 and you get partials on 13, which is a terrifying amount of shots to put into a horde unit.
Yeah, it's effective, and I know I had some serious respect from that Empire play. I hadn't played against cannons. I think it was the first time I played against cannons in this edition. I knew how to avoid some of the bounces, because I know large targets can stop them from going through things. So I knew I could screen my engines using my Terrorgeist, but I forgot just how deadly they are. Like, they are just laser accurate. They don't miss, because especially against the 50 big massive base, they don't miss. And with an engineer, they don't misfire either. So they're hitting you every turn. There was 3 of them, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is so difficult to deal with. And so them and a Hellblast as well. A Hellblaster in one volley almost killed the Mortis engine. I think it did 6 wounds in one volley. So just really impressive war machine. So these factions that have got these war machines, I think they're going to come back, and that's why I think you don't want to run all big monsters. I think you do need that mixture of units, so you don't feel like you're playing that rock paper scissors game.
Yeah, I agree. And it's nice because seeing competitive armies in Old World compared to 40k, where it's just what's the best data sheet, I'm going to run 3 of it, what's the next best data sheet, I'll run 3 of it. In Old World, you've got more of a thought of composition, which is something that I'm sort of looking towards more and trying to have more purpose for my units.
Yeah, definitely.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. You have, I've heard, an army and a half to paint for your event in 2 days' time, so I won't take up too much more of your time. Anything else that you want to end on before we finish?
No, I've really enjoyed being here, and I really hope they keep tweaking. I know they've said legends are going to get, they're not for tournament play, but I hope they do keep tweaking them a little bit and maybe fixing some of the problems and some of the issues in these legends, because I think they're really characterful armies. Like vampire counts, I couldn't imagine fantasy being fantasy without vampire counts and Scathe and Realism, and so I really hope they just tweak some of the points, perhaps some of the rule interactions, and I'd love to keep playing these armies for the years to come, even if they don't get updated. Like they don't get journals, it would still be nice to get the odd little tweak here and there. So I hope they do.
Well, they have said it. The scope of the project has changed. So I have faith. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out. Even if my guess is that, when Old World 2.0 comes out in 3 years' time, we just see everything rolled in together. But
That'd be lovely, yeah.
yeah, whatever it is, looking forward to it. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed, please do subscribe. That we are growing the new channel. All of the Old World content will be on this channel moving forwards, and we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.